I used to think silence could fix things, that if I kept my head down, did what was right, and swallowed enough humiliation, the people who hurt me would one day see what I'd been carrying. They never did. For years, I sat through dinners where my name was the punchline, where the people who should have known me best laughed at the quiet woman who never fought back. Every time I thought about standing up, I heard my mother's voice. "Don't make a scene, Linnea. Be graceful." So I learned how to disappear with dignity. But the night they turned my story into a joke, the night I realized their cruelty wasn't ignorance but choice, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger. It was the slow, steady understanding that Grace had done nothing but teach them how to step harder. I don't owe them silence anymore. And when they see me next, they'll understand what quiet was really hiding all along. The sound of distant rotors cut through the Texas heat, steady and familiar, the kind of rhythm that feels more like memory than noise. In this small house outside San Antonio, quiet wasn't peace, it was residue, the kind that settles after years of holding your breath. On the kitchen table, a gold envelope waited where I'd left it that morning, its edges catching the afternoon light. The embossed lettering gleamed, too elegant for what it really was. An invitation that could reopen an old wound. Jefferson High, class of 1998, 25th reunion, Lake Tahoe. The name printed at the bottom stopped me cold. Hosted by Addison Price. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years, yet it carried the same sting, the same laughter that used to echo down locker-lined halls when I walked by. The same small-town cruelty dressed up as charm. I turned the envelope over, half expecting to see the past spill out. Instead, there was only silence and the faint hum of a life I'd built far away from them. But silence can only stretch so long before it starts to sound like surrender. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose pane in the kitchen window. I reached for the envelope again. The gold caught the light and flickered like a dare. It was time to go back, not to be seen, but to end what never really ended. The drive to Lake Tahoe wound through pine forests and narrow mountain roads, the kind of silence that feels too heavy to be peaceful. When the resort finally came into view, its lights shimmered across the dark surface of the lake like a stage set. My headlights caught the sign out front. "Welcome back, class of 98. The letters glowed warm gold against the cold night. I couldn't help but laugh under my breath. They were welcoming the class of 98, but not all of us. Not the girl they'd whispered about and quietly erased. Inside, perfume and expensive wine hung thick in the air. Familiar faces had grown older, but not kinder. Their smiles hadn't changed. Those sharp, knowing smiles that carried the same small-town cruelty wrapped in polite conversation. And then, there she was. Addison Price. Red dress, camera-ready posture, the kind of beauty that knows it's being watched. Her eyes widened when she saw me, just for a second, before she slid into that polished charm she'd perfected on TV. "Linnea Brooks. Look at you. I almost didn't recognize you. You're so... understated." I gave a half smile. That's what gravity does. Keeps us grounded. Laughter rippled around the room. The same shallow sound from years ago. But behind Addison's smile, something cold flashed. She led me through clusters of people, investors, journalists, classmates, introducing me like a curiosity she'd found in the attic. I played along, polite, detached, waiting for her to show her hand. When the speeches began, she took the stage with perfect timing. Her voice filled the room, steady and self-assured. "My new show, The Future of Flight, launches this fall in collaboration with the Department of Defense and Orbital Defense Systems." My chest tightened. Orbital. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in decades, but it still carried the metallic taste of wreckage and loss. On the screen behind her, the company logo glimmered silver blue, the same one painted on Ethan's aircraft the day it went down. Addison glanced my way, like she could feel the shift in me. "Some of us learned how to rise after falling," she said. pausing just long enough to twist the knife, and some of us just never took off. The laughter returned, predictable as thunder. I didn't move, didn't flinch, but inside, something darkened. I understood then. She wasn't just reminiscing. She was repackaging the past, my past, to sell her future, later, when the music dulled and the crowd thinned. I walked the hallway, lined with old class photos. My hand stopped at the yearbook frame for 98. My name was gone from the list of honors. The caption beneath my senior photo had been rewritten, "Withdrew before flight program." A small, bitter smile crept across my face. Addison hadn't just organized a reunion. She'd rewritten history. The cold outside hit harder than I expected. I stepped onto the balcony, letting the wind off the lake sting my skin. Tahoe's surface mirrored the moon, sharp and fragile. "You still hate crowds," a voice said behind me. I turned. Nolan Pierce, older, broader, but the same steady eyes. We hadn't spoken in years. He studied me for a moment. "You didn't tell me you'd be here. Last time we talked, you said you were done." I met his gaze. "I don't retire from gravity." He exhaled, then lowered his voice. "Addison's crew set up a private uplink this afternoon. Military frequency, encrypted. That's not standard broadcast equipment." My pulse steadied into focus. I reached for the secured phone in my pocket, entered the code. The screen flashed red. "Meridian breach. UAV data compromised. Source, Lakeview Resort." I stared out at the lake, the surface trembling under the wind. Somewhere beneath that water lay the wreckage of a plane that should have never flown. Nolan's voice broke the silence. "You think it's them? Orbital never deleted the Aurora codes," I said quietly. "They just changed the logo." The pieces fell together like gears locking in place. Addison's grand Future of Flight broadcast wasn't just vanity. It was a cover for transmitting classified UAV schematics through her live feed. I watched the moon flicker across the water and thought of Ethan's last flight. The same reflection he'd seen before the sky opened up beneath him. History wasn't repeating itself. It was being re-engineered, right under the same golden lights that once mocked me. And this time, I wasn't going to let it happen again. The hum of jazz followed me back into the ballroom, soft but hollow. The kind of music meant to make people forget who they used to be. Glasses clinked, laughter echoed, and beneath it all hung that heavy perfume of money and self-importance. The reunion didn't feel like old classmates catching up. It felt like a campaign fundraiser. Every smile rehearsed. Addison had changed dresses. The red had been replaced with silver, shimmering, metallic, flawless, like a mirror that only reflected her own image. When she walked to the stage, every head turned as if pulled by gravity. She held the microphone with the ease of someone who'd made a career out of being listened to. "Tonight, we celebrate not just who we were, but who we became." Applause broke out, loud and automatic. I sat at the edge of the room, the same forgotten seat I'd once taken at every high school dance, near the emergency exit. Addison looked straight at me across the room, her smile just sharp enough to cut. Some of us took risks, some of us crashed, but look where we all are now. The laughter that followed spread through the crowd like static. I raised my glass, calm, even as my phone vibrated against my palm. Meridian breach escalating. Unauthorized upload detected. I caught Nolan's eyes from across the room. One look was enough. Addison wasn't just broadcasting the reunion. She was transmitting through a stolen military uplink, piggybacking her show on encrypted frequencies. And she didn't even know the file she'd chosen wasn't harmless footage. It was the original UAV schematic from the Aurora project. Ethan's legacy, his death. I stayed silent as the music swelled again. A man slid into the chair beside me, drunk enough to be cruel. Greg Turner. The kind of man who used to whisper lies loud enough for everyone to hear. He leaned in, breath heavy with whiskey. "You know she's filming again, right? Says she'll expose the crash. Said your fiancé screwed up. That you covered for him." I looked at him evenly. He didn't screw up. Someone changed the logs. Greg smirked, unconvinced. That's not what her documentary says. Of course it wasn't. Addison was never satisfied destroying what she envied. She needed to rewrite it. When the dinner turned into dancing, she floated back toward me, champagne glass in hand, her smile sweet as venom. Still quiet? Linnea? I used to think you were mysterious. Now I think you're just hiding. I placed my glass down, meeting her gaze. And I used to think you were brilliant. Now I think you're just loud. The music faltered, replaced by the low rumble of thunder outside. Lightning flashed against the tall windows, slicing the room in two. Addison tilted her head, her voice thin and mocking. You know, I almost dedicated my show to you. The girl who wanted to fly and fell instead. Has a ring to it, don't you think? I stood, calm and steady. Careful. Addison, some of us actually learned how to land. Her smirk faltered. The temperature seemed to drop a few degrees. My phone buzzed again. A message from Colonel Whitaker. General Brooks, your presence may be required immediately. Stay alert. Whitaker never said may. It meant the situation had tipped. I slipped the phone into my pocket, turned, and walked away, leaving behind the smell of champagne, the sound of laughter, and every curious stare that trailed me to the door. The hallway outside was colder, the air charged with static. Through the glass, the lake churned beneath a bruised sky, lightning webbing across the water like cracked glass. I stepped outside, the wind biting at my face as I unlocked the secure phone. The screen glowed red. Source pinpointed. Lakeview Uplink Station. Suspect. Addison Media Broadcast Node. So it was true. Every frame of her fake documentary was being sent live across international servers. My earpiece clicked. Nolan's voice, tight. Her team still transmitting. Do we pull the plug? No, I said quietly. Let them finish digging their own hole. Inside, Addison was surrounded by mini cameras, reporters pressing closer. Addison, is it true you're working with Orbital Defense Systems? She flashed her broadcast smile. Of course. It's about ethics and innovation. I watched her, so radiant under the spotlight, so certain she was untouchable, while knowing that every word she spoke was being traced, logged, and archived by the Pentagon. The irony was almost poetic. Outside, the wind rose again. Glasses rattled. Someone screamed as the chandeliers trembled. At first, the crowd thought it was thunder, but then came the low, rhythmic thump that made the windows quake. Rotor blades, heavy, close. My stomach tightened. Uch 60 Yen, Black Hawk. They'd come early. The main doors burst open. Cold air and pine needles rushed in. Soldiers swept the entrance, voices cutting through the chaos. Clear the area. Military operation in progress. Panic erupted. Addison stumbled backward, silver fabric whipping around her legs. She clutched her microphone, shouting over the roar. What's happening? Is this part of your show, Linnea? I stepped forward, wind tearing at my hair. The officer descended from the chopper, visor down, voice sharp. Major General Linnea Brooks. Ma'am, Pentagon requests your immediate presence. The room froze. Forks clattered onto plates. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. Shock, disbelief, fear. Addison's mouth fell open. You're military? I paused at the doorway. Yes, and you just trespassed on federal grounds. The air surged as I crossed the threshold. The rotor wash whipped through the room, scattering napkins and arrogance alike. I climbed aboard without looking back, the door sealing shut behind me. Through the glass, I could still see Addison, small, stunned, drenched in the white light of the helicopter's spotlight. The same light that used to make her feel invincible now looked a lot like judgment. The helicopter doors closed with a heavy clang, cutting off the roar of the wind outside. Inside, red emergency lights cast long shadows over the cabin. I removed my headset and stared out the window. Lakeview shrank below me into tiny dots, pinpricks of light in the dark. Across from me, a young officer opened a tablet. Command needs you in D.C. Ma'am. Immediate debrief on the Meridian breach. By the time we landed at Andrews, dawn was just breaking. A car whisked me through the sterile corridors of the Pentagon. Colonel Whitaker met me at the door, exhausted, his eyes sharp despite the fatigue. He dropped a tablet onto the table. Addison Media's network routed the breach. They're not careless, they're connected. Orbital's fingerprints are all over it. Lines of code streamed across the screen. One file glowed in red. Aurora flight data, 1998. Reconstructed. Someone had revived the wreckage meant to stay buried. Whitaker looked at me, tense. You said the flight logs were altered back then. Looks like they used the same encryption to breach us now. I recognized it immediately. The cipher I'd created to protect the original data. Someone had sold it to Addison. They hadn't just stolen data, they'd reopened a grave. Pentagon wants containment, he continued. But PR will explode before morning. She's teasing a trailer. I leaned forward. Then we use her own spotlight to blind her. By mid-morning, every screen in the media room was tuned to Addison Price, smiling perfectly on a morning talk show. Last night, a military helicopter interrupted our reunion, staged or real. My docuseries explores transparency and truth in the defense industry. #Hatrick fake hero flashed. Comments accused me of staging it, claiming I'd joined the military to atone for Ethan's death. Each line hit like a blade. Nolan appeared, holding an external drive. Orbital paid Addison $3 million under a consultancy clause. He played the recording. Addison's voice, smooth, confessed. If the public sees her as a fraud, no one will ask where the real data came from. She thought she was in control. She didn't realize the Pentagon had full access to her broadcast signal. Whitaker's voice came over the comms. Authorization granted. You may respond. I looked at Nolan. Upload our version, uncut, same feed. Minutes later, the audio from Aurora's original files streamed live. Suppressed the test failure. Blame the pilot. The truth detonated across every network. Ethan was cleared, and Addison Media was exposed. Comments flooded in. One repeated thousands of times. She didn't stage a stunt. She survived one. 3 hours later, Addison appeared live again at Lake Tahoe, trying to reclaim the narrative. Whitaker asked for orders. Let her speak. I said, but every camera she turns on points straight at the truth. The sky over Tahoe boiled with snow and wind, the kind that makes everything feel fragile. I stepped from the SUV, boots sinking into the wet powder, the chill cutting through my coat. Camera lights flashed across the makeshift stage, and Addison Price stood at the center, poised and glowing under the lenses. Behind her, the banner read, Addison Price. The truth. They tried to silence. She spoke into the microphone, every word polished. They call me a traitor for asking questions, but transparency is patriotism. Tonight, I'll show you what they don't want you to see. I moved forward through the crunching snow. Soldiers formed a perimeter. Whitaker signaled, feed live, all networks. Lightning split the sky, tearing banners and rattling equipment. Addison looked up, pale, as I stepped fully into view. Silver stars glinting against my wet uniform. The screens flickered, and the Aurora flight recorder audio filled the air. If she files that report, we lose the contract, erase her analysis, erase her name. Her face went white, hands trembling. I stepped closer. You edited it 25 years ago. Now it's live, uncut, broadcasted on every network you built. The storm roared around us like applause. Behind her, cameras swung toward me. I spoke calmly, letting the words carry. Truth doesn't scream. Addison, it lands, steady, like a helicopter in a storm. I turned, leaving her with the storm, her reputation igniting in the cold light. The next morning, headlines lit up screens across the country. Orbital defense executives arrested. Media star under investigation for breach of federal secrets. Right beneath it, my name appeared. General Linnea Brooks clears decades-old cover-up. I walked the sterile halls of the Pentagon, uniform crisp, gloves white, every step echoing against cold tiles. Whitaker handed me a folder with a single envelope on top. President wants to see you. Medal of Distinguished Service. The hallways blurred as I made my way into the White House briefing room. The president, older now with silver hair, extended his hand and spoke slowly. Each word measured. Major General Brooks, you served your country not with noise, but with endurance. In this era, that is rarer than heroism. I nodded, voice low and steady. Silence is just endurance with discipline. Sir, the flashes of cameras caught the folds of my uniform, but all I could see was Ethan's smile in the cockpit. Hear his voice again. If you fall, fall upward. I had done it. Not for vengeance, not for applause, but to preserve the truth, to honor the memory of those who could no longer speak. As I stepped out, a reporter called, General Brooks. Any comment on Addison Price? I paused, letting the words hang in the cold morning air. No comment. The sky already answered her. A year had passed. Jefferson High unveiled the Hall of Flight, honoring alumni who had served the nation. For the first time in 25 years, my invitation bore my name, spelled correctly. No omissions, no mistakes. The sky was clear, sunlight warm as I approached the bronze wall reflecting golden rays. At its center, a plaque read, Linnea Brooks, Integrity in the Sky. Beside it stood the bust of a female pilot, gaze fixed upward. I lingered, silent. No cameras, no audience, just the quiet weight of recognition. A young student, maybe 17, stepped forward. My brother's joining the Air Force because of you, he said. I smiled. Then tell him, flying isn't about the height, it's about the reason. As I turned to leave, a receptionist handed me an envelope. Inside was an old photo. Addison and I in our high school uniforms, forcing smiles for the camera. On the back, a note. You kept flying. I finally learned to land. A. I folded it carefully, tucked it away. No anger, just the lingering wind of the storm that had passed. Outside, the hum of training helicopters echoed across the mountains. I lifted my gaze to the silver trails across the sky. Calm, steady, free. They mocked me for dreaming of the sky. I whispered, now, the sky remembers. I stepped down the stairs, morning light warming my shoulders, and understood, finally, the silence I had kept all these years had found its voice.